Hello, my name is Chris Ekpekurede. I'm an engineer and a writer, publisher of a number of books, and an elder of the Church of Christ. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You see, in a couple of weeks from now, the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal will be giving its judgment on the ongoing petition at the appeal court. Now, what are the major expectations of Nigerians concerning the tribunal? And what chances do these expectations or potential pronouncement offer for a Peter Obi presidency? That is what I want to dwell on in today's episode. Now, here are the three major expectations of the tribunal by Nigerians. Number one, the disqualification of Tinubu. Number two, cancellation of the entire February 25th presidential election on grounds of substantial non-compliance by INEC with the annulment of Tinubu's declaration due to his non-achievement of the 25% in the FCT as required. And then number three, possibly a declaration of an alternative winner of the elections by the tribunal. Now, I am going to rate each of these three expected outcomes and rate Peter Obi's chances in relation to them on a scale of high, medium, and low according to the probability of their occurrence. Now, let's take them one by one. Let's take the disqualification of Tinubu, which will be due to a number of factors. 5 factors, in my opinion. Number one, his forgery of university certificate and NYSC certificate or discharge certificates, as the case may be, which I rate as very high because these forgeries are very, very glaring. The number 2 factor that could disqualify Tinubu will be Shetima's double nomination. Now, in the records of INEC, Shetima was nominated both to be vice presidential candidate to Tinubu and to be a senatorial candidate in his state for at least one day in INEC's records. Now, somebody in the tribunal might argue, well, one day, it is insignificant. At least a motive to pull out of one nomination and enter into another is there, even if there was a breach of the guidelines for one day. Well, it is a tenuous argument. You know, it could potentially split the tribunal. But like I said in my last video, a crime is a crime. Now, because of the to and fro arguments that can be offered, and especially because the Supreme Court had already ruled previously against PDP when they brought this matter of double nomination against Shetima and Tinubu, I have decided that I will rate this particular factor as a medium, not a high. Now, the number 3 factor that could potentially disqualify Tinubu is Shetima's invalid nomination, which is a different thing from his double nomination. Now, the Allied People's Movement brought the matter of the invalid nomination. You see, when Tinubu decided to replace the previous placeholder for vice presidency, he was expected by the guidelines to nominate a replacement within 14 days, but he took 21 days, thereby breaching the electoral laws. This factor potentially disqualifying Tinubu, I rate it as very high. Now, the number 4 factor that could disqualify Tinubu is his conviction for drug offenses. Now, here, people might argue that, well, these offenses took place so many years ago that today they are no longer relevant as to whether or not he should contest or is qualified to contest an election. And of course, there is also the ongoing argument in the tribunal as to whether his forfeiture of $460,000 at that time is the equivalent of a fine, which the Constitution defines as a basis for disqualifying a candidate for election. So once again, based on how tenuous the arguments around the conviction for drug offenses is, I have decided to rate this very factor as a medium, not a high. Now, the fifth factor that could potentially disqualify Tinubu is his dual citizenship. When he filled his nomination forms, he lied about that, and that is perjury. Perjury is a high crime and can disqualify a candidate for election. Therefore, I rate that factor as a high. Now, in conclusion, out of 5 factors that could potentially disqualify Tinubu, 3 are high factors. I do not see how he's going to be able to escape all of them. Therefore, as far as disqualification of Tinubu is concerned, I rate this outcome as a high outcome. It is something that is most likely to be pronounced by the tribunal. Now, the number 2 expectation of Nigerians is the cancellation of the entire elections due to the substantial non-compliance of INEC to both constitutional guidelines and the electoral guidelines. Now, there are 3 major prevailing factors that could determine outright cancellation of the results. The number 1 factor is INEC's refusal to upload the election results into the IREF and in due time as required by the electoral guidelines. Now, INEC has argued that a previous High Court ruling had given them the mandate to collate the election results in whatever way they deem fit. But then, the prosecution lawyers made it clear that in the recent Governor Oyetola case with INEC, the Supreme Court ruled that the upload of election results into IREF is mandatory. It is not optional. And the rulings of the Supreme Court will always override the rulings of lower courts. Therefore, the non-upload of the results is a factor that I rate very high. It could lead to the cancellation of the entire election. Now, the factor number 2 that could lead to the cancellation of the election is the factor of the 25% votes in the FCT. Tinubu did not meet that. Yet, INEC erroneously declared him winner. If the tribunal holds that 25% in FCT is mandatory, the elections will be cancelled because there is no winner. Even if INEC says Tinubu scored all the states where they claimed he had 25%, not getting FCT will cancel the elections. Therefore, I rate this factor as a medium because there are so many legal arguments both for and against 25%. Now, the number 3 factor that could lead to a cancellation of the results is the fact that so many polling unit results in IREF are blurred and unreadable. On top of that, more than 39,000 polling unit results cannot be accessed in IREF. When you put these 2 categories of polling unit results together, over 8 million votes are unaccounted for. 8 million votes. Now, when you look at the votes allocated to Tinubu and Atiku and Peter Obi, 8 million votes makes a huge and significant difference if accounted for. On the basis of that alone, the tribunal will cancel the elections. And neither INEC nor Tinubu's lawyers argued against this particular factor. So I rate this factor as a high factor for the disqualification of the election results. Now you see, 2 out of the 3 important factors that could cancel the elections have returned, in my own analysis, a high rating. Therefore, the conclusion is that the possibility that the elections will be cancelled is high. Now, expectation number 3 is that the courts, the tribunal, will declare an alternative winner to Tinubu based on the figures allocated by INEC. Now, here, the fact is that the judges might be reluctant to go forward to nominate or appoint or declare another winner if they stand very strongly on the fact that the elections in totality was substantially marred by non-compliance. The judge cannot say, well, the elections substantially did not comply to rules and regulations, and at the same time go ahead and nominate a winner out of that same election. That would be farcical. So that factor, to me, rates very high against the judges anointing another winner. Now, secondly, given the figures that have been allocated by INEC, neither Atiku nor Peter Obi meets the criteria for winning the election. You see, the guidelines require that the winning candidate scores at least 25% of the votes in a minimum of 24 states and also in Abuja. Now, Atiku scored 25% according to INEC's allocations in only 21 states. Doesn't meet the requirement. Peter Obi scored 25% according to INEC's allocation in only 15 states. Doesn't meet the requirement. Now, on top of that, Atiku did not get 25% in the FCT. Now, Peter Obi was wise enough not to make a strong case to be named the winner after he had argued and brought evidence to support the fact that the election was substantially incorrect. But Atiku went ahead to ask the tribunal to anoint him the winner. Now, that is fraudulent, because he cannot argue that the elections were mad and at the same time ask the tribunal to appoint him or name him the winner. Whoever becomes the president of Nigeria, given where we are today, should be a person of integrity, in my opinion. Now, all put together, the chances of the tribunal announcing an alternative winner are very low. Now, based on all these ratings, here are my two predictions from the tribunal. Tinubu will be disqualified, that's number one. And then number two, the election of February 25th will be cancelled. Now, both of these predictions cannot altogether fail. Either one or both of them will happen. And this will lead to either a rerun or a runoff. A rerun election happens if the tribunal says the election that took place was not properly done. A runoff will take place if the tribunal says, well, despite failures here and there, the election of the February 25th was substantially okay, but Tinubu did not score the required percentage in the FCT, so there is no clear winner. Then there is a runoff. Now, let us look at rerun and runoff. Now, if there is a rerun or a redoing of the elections for all the 18 presidential candidates as a result of some judgment gymnastics by the tribunal, and Tinubu is not disqualified from participating, then all presidential candidates are qualified to rerun because of substantial non-compliance by INEC. Now, it will be a runoff, on the other hand, between Atiku and Peter Obi if the judges uphold the elections but disqualify Tinubu. On the other hand, it will be a runoff between Tinubu and Peter Obi if the judges uphold the election and don't disqualify Tinubu but hold that Tinubu did not score 25% in the FCT. It's straightforward analysis. Now, Section 134 of the Constitution stipulates that in the event of a runoff, it is the candidate who scored the highest number of votes, in this case, Tinubu, and one of the other candidates who scored the highest number of majority votes in the states. Now, what is a majority vote? A majority vote is the candidate scoring more than 50% of the votes cast in each state. Now, based on the allocations by INEC, Atiku has met that score in only 4 states. Atiku has majority votes in only 4 states, while Peter Obi has majority votes in 7 states. And then there is also the FCT, where he won clearly and has the majority vote. So in the event of a runoff, it is going to be between Tinubu and Peter Obi if the tribunals hold that the elections that took place are sufficiently good or good enough. Now, what it means is that whether we are speaking about a rerun or a runoff, Peter Obi will be a participant in the next elections once the tribunal rules. So what are Peter Obi's chances in any other election that we see in the horizon? Now, a runoff with Atiku will have the sentiments that at this time the presidency should rotate to the south. That sentiment will be working in favor of Peter Obi against Atiku. Peter Obi in that runoff will clearly win the votes in the south, most parts of the middle belt, and make serious incursions into the far north. So Peter Obi's chances in a runoff against Atiku are high. Now, if the runoff is between Peter Obi and Tinubu, Tinubu's poor performance as president and the anger of the masses against him will work against him. Tinubu promised to hit the ground running, but what did he do? He hit Nigerians hard and ran over them. I am beginning to think that God probably allowed Tinubu to be president so Nigerians will appreciate just how bad a president he is, how unfit he is to be president of this nation, and how badly they need a savior in a man like Peter Obi. So I rate Peter Obi's chances in a runoff against Tinubu very high. Now, talking about the rerun among all the 18 presidential candidates, what I foresee is that there will be a coalition, a realignment of forces in the political parties behind Peter Obi because people are tired of Tinubu and everybody will want to dump him. There is an emerging sentiment, like I said before, that the presidency should come to the south and places Peter Obi squarely in a position to become president. So overall, Peter Obi is in a good position to be president. Obedience should therefore rejoice, but as they rejoice, they should maintain the tempo and campaign hard for the re-election or the rerun. Now, of course, all these assessments and prognoses that I have made are based on a thorough overhaul of the INEC and the removal of Mahmoud Yakubu as its chairman. Here is a man who instead of free, fair, and credible election that he promised, delivered to us the most unfree, unfair, and clearly the most incredible elections ever held for president in this country. With the current INEC the way it is, and Tinubu's crazy appetite to rig elections, we will be back to square one in no time, and then we will start another hot process in court arguing over another election. Nigeria cannot afford that. We've wasted enough time, we've wasted money, and we've trampled on the patience of Nigerians long enough. That must not happen. Thank you for watching. Please share the video, give a thumbs up to it, and by all means, subscribe, and see you soon.